So he's gone, but like I think there's a hypothesis which says that it is that like that something can come from nothing.
Yeah.
Um, it's about like unstable space and or because like nothing is unstable, literally where like time and space does not exist. It's unstable. But here was just a point to bring up.
Yeah.
But back to what I was saying with my earlier point. Um, so back to the objective and subjective points. One about naturalism or moral
Yeah.
naturalism, which is that we can observe moral facts of the world around us through our senses. For example, I can see someone. If I punch someone in the face, right, the pain
Hmm.
from that punch produces a negative response, which is, I guess, say already as we agreed upon. Um, it's kind of like we already know it's wrong,
Yeah.
and that's why I might punch them back, or I might be like, "Hey, that's mean," Um, so yeah, and you brought up about psycho or psychos and sociopaths, which they
Hmm.
don't actually experience these remorseful actions.
Yeah.
But I do believe with these points, it's not really like a no remorse at all. It's more of a lack of remorse. Would you like to pick
Isn't
up
that
from there?
isn't that kind of the same thing? Lack of remorse and no remorse?
No, no. Okay. So lack of remorse is they don't feel as much as remorse or as much remorse as a normal person should. So, for example, let's say let's say I stab someone's mother, right? And I look at their son that's just seen this, and I'm like, the son is like crying, tears flowing out, scared for his life, Then someone who's like a normal person, right, or might be like, yo, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have killed his like mother in front of him, right?
Mm.
But like someone with like lack of remorse might be like, yo, shit, but like, it's not
Yeah,
my problem.
they
Like a
don't
lack
care.
of remorse. No. It's not they don't care. It's just that they have problems caring as much as a normal person would, right?
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
I think, yeah, good.
yeah, I mean, it obviously comes in a gradient. Like some people have weak responses, but some people truly just don't have a response at all. And if you look at brain scans of such individuals, they show less activity in the regions associated with those emotional responses.
Um, yeah. So I'm pretty sure with psychopathology, right, the disorder given to this would be called, as I said a while ago when we were discussing this, antisocial personality disorder, which is a disorder which shows that the personality is different to a normal person's. It's kind of like what we give as borderline personality disorder, where their personality is split between, let's say, character A and character B. They might be a different person around some people, and a different character on other people. But I think the point that we should bring up with this, right, is that people with antisocial personality disorder have a different personality, in the sense that their personality is extremely different to how a normal person should be. Um, and so with this, right, I can't, I wouldn't say that lack, and I think like you don't understand the semantics in a sense, because lack just means they don't have as much of as X,
Yeah,
which would X would
I
be like
mean, sure.
what would subject term, um, but I don't think that there's any evidence which would show that they have no remorse, unless you want to like show evidence of antisocial personality disorder linked to um, actions with no remorse at all, because I
Yeah,
think that
I mean,
yeah.
if you look at the most like the most brutal and inhumane of serial killers we've seen are people who have these conditions, which often are trauma responses from. So that's what I mean by morality is subjective. It's because like everything, it's a response from the brain, and if something happens to alter the way the brain processes those things, then they don't exist in the same way that they do in normal healthy people. So. Uh, like there's nothing fundamental out in the universe about how we should behave. It's embedded in the brain structure, and if the brain structure changes, then those things changes too. If you'd if
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, my bad. I was trying to think of something that didn't work. Okay, But what we have to realize, Brian, is that these moral things are true even if we had no way of knowing about them. And this point that you're bringing up, where like these people who have like actions, have like no remorse. I don't think it's again back to my point. I don't think it's no remorse. I think it's a lack of remorse. And with morality, we have these things called stand independent moral facts. Do you know what they are?
Not quite now.
Okay, so when we say stance, we're saying like our beliefs, our goals, desires, etc. When we
Hmm.
say stance independent, we're saying that these things wouldn't be dependent on what we want, what our goals are, what our desires are. When we say stance independent moral facts, we're saying that these moral truths, such as killing is wrong, is factual, right? And so when we say stand independent moral facts and we combine that all, it's saying that these things are morally going to just be the case, independent of our goals, desires, etc. And even if we didn't know about them, we would still understand them to be true, independent of what we believe. And I think one thing that we ought to bring up, right, is that if moral realism is false, people would not disagree with other views of morality. I mean, people do disagree with other views of morality, right?
Yeah.
We do understand that even like during the Nazi regime, multiple people who are outside of Germany, knowing the horrors of the Nazis, agreed that it was morally wrong. I think we all agree that not neo-Nazism is a bad thing, right? And
Yeah.
so it would go like this: one, if moral realism is false, people would not disagree with other views of morality. Two, people do disagree with other views of morality, so the conclusion of moral realism is true, right? Imagine that I claim that late-term abortion is morally wrong, but you claim it is not. Common
Yeah.
sense tells us that we cannot both be right, and that one of us must have made a mistake. If moral realism is false and late-term abortions do not have either the property of being right or the property of being wrong, then it is hard to see why we cannot accept that we both be right. In other words, we might think that moral realism is the best explanation for why we hold that an act cannot be both right and not right, both good and not good, and so on.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting you bring up that we tend to disagree on different moral issues, but the very fact that we can disagree shows us that there is no true blueprint that all people follow and that all people are subject to, because yeah, there's a lot of different views on that, and uh, yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're trying to bring up Mackey's argument for anti-moral realism, which says that we have relative views on morality because we all
Exactly.
open-minded people disagree all the time about moral statements, such as maybe tax evasion is wrong, and then I might say that tax evasion is okay, and then we cannot understand if it's moral or immoral, so therefore we might as well just conclude that it's both moral and immoral in a sense because it differs from person to person, but P2 goes over, or number two, my second point goes over this. People do disagree with other views of morality, right? And
Hmm.
remember, this is an if-then statement, which is a conditional, right? And I'm saying if moral realism is false, people would not disagree with other views of morality, right? And the reason why they would not disagree, right, is because they would not have any reason to convince the other person of their view, because it would just inherently be by the nature of morality. If it was subjective, then it would be based on how I've been raised. So therefore, any form of trying to convince someone of what is moral and what is immoral is trying to lead us to truth values, meaning that the truth values, such as in cognitivism or if you look at moral cognitivism, it says that we have moral facts, um, and so with these moral facts, right, we can just distinguish that some things we know to be either wrong, objectively true or objectively false within terms of morality, which means that these moral statements, such as killing is wrong, is a statement. That is all it is. It's a claim, right? These and claims have to either have a truth value of true or false, right? So it comes down like this, right? Do you agree? This is a statement. Killing is wrong.
I do agree.
Okay. Would you also agree to claim
What?
that more? If I say like killing is wrong, like okay, hold on. If I say killing is wrong, do you agree that's a claim?
I do agree it's a claim, yes.
Okay. So now, if I make the claim, let's say that hedgehog over there is spiky. Is
Hmm.
that a claim in the sense that is it true or false?
That is a claim in the sense that it's true or false, yes.
Okay, so do you agree that by nature of what a claim is, claims have to be true or false?
Not necessarily. Like, if I ask you, is, I don't know, Sauron the best fictional villain? That's entirely subjective. There's not any truth element to that. It comes down to preference. So I'd say there's different kinds of statements.
Such as?
Such as that, for example, like if um, I think there's
But
a
can I
lot
just
of
say,
claims you can make that don't
with
necessarily have an objective yes or no answer. It comes down to interpretation and agreement, and morality may be one of those subjects.
with statements, statements by nature of what it is, if you look at like even definitions of Google, right, or with Oxford, statements
Hmm.
is just a definite or clear expression of something in speech or writing. So if I make a state, if I make, if I, let's say I say, the three laws of logic do exist, right? That's a definitive thing. It has to exist. It's necessary, etc. It's just going to be the case that it exists, right? Meaning that these things have a truth value, right? So it's either
Yeah.
wrong or it's either true or false, right? Now, a
Hmm.
claim, I think, as you just said, is kind of different.
Yeah.
Claims can be based on subjective values, but when you agree that the idea that killing is wrong is a statement, you also agree that it's a definite claim, meaning that it has to have a truth value. It cannot be ambiguous.
Okay, I suppose I can rephrase it like you can determine the truth value in relation to things like if you want to judge killing based like it's wrong based on what exactly? Like I'd say from a societal standard, obviously a society that operates on the preface that killing is okay is not going to perform very well. So in that regard, killing is absolutely wrong if you want to maintain a healthy society.
Okay, but with my point where I said that imagine that I claim that late term abortion is morally wrong, but you claim it is not, and they went over that point. What would your response be to that? Because the point that I just brought up earlier about like the statement point, and I think you can rephrase it if you'd like to, but I think the main point that we should go back onto now that I should I think the main point that we should be on is the point where I said P1, if moral state realism is true, people would not disagree with other views of morality. Again, as I said, neo-Nazism. We see that people obviously disagree that neo-Nazism is true collectively, and so we would agree that morality is objective based off that. What would your response be to that?
Okay, so you're saying okay, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that moral objectivism is correct because with cases such as neo-Nazism, we see that practically all people agree that it's wrong.
Yeah, I would say in a sense, because it's kind of like if moral realism, right, is false, which is the idea that like moral statements do not have, or if moral realism is basically just like the idea that more statements that contain moral points, such as killing is wrong, has like a true or false value. Um, I believe that if moral realism is false, people would not live like moral facts exist. So we would not claim that neo-Nazism is bad if anti-moral realism is a truth, which is subjective morality, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because we have no grounds to claim that that neo-Nazism is wrong.
No, no, no.
Because
I
yeah,
exactly, and I think that morality, in a certain context, you could say that it's objective. So what I mean is, we are born with a very definite like predisposed sense of morality in the same way like we have structures in our brains that give us the cognitive faculty that is morality um, in the same way that we're born with cognitive faculties for recognizing faces and being afraid of darkness and such things. So based on those things that are in the brain, you could like that's why we collectively sort of agree that those things are wrong because we all have the same kind of blueprint for it. So in that sense, it's objective. What I mean by subjective is more kind of like beyond that. Uh, it's not really like it's like if the human species didn't exist, these things makes no sense to even talk about. Like they don't exist in the universe independent of us. It's a product of of how our species operate. Like we think about it in this way, but there's nothing fundamental in the universe telling us it's this way. That's what I mean.
I mean, I guess I kind of like wouldn't agree with this. Because wait one second. Yeah. So it doesn't really like work though, because moral facts are manifested in moral actions, right? This doesn't even, this doesn't mean that morality is subjective or made up by humans in the same way that laws of logic would be true whether we existed or not. Whether or not the universe existed, the laws of logic and causality would still be true, even if there were no physical examples of causality to observe, right? So
Oh,
if the human species didn't exist, these moral facts would still be the case and still be existent. It's kind of just like, as I said again, like the laws of logic, right? The laws of logic would still be existent independent of whether humans lived or not.
sure, but that like the laws of logic again, like I said with in the conversation with Rick, is that logic is it's observations we make about the universe, and the universe would presumably exist in the exact same way, regardless if we did. So of course those observations would remain consistent. But the thing about morality is that it comes about from evolution. That's like if you think about like we recognize faces, right? If we didn't do that, it would be pretty detrimental to our survival. Uh, and in the same way, the early hominids that did have no concern with killing each other and whatever, those are the ones that died out, obviously. The ones that do care about each other and have a preface for not doing such things are the ones that are going to survive. So it logically follows that the only humans that are left would be the ones that operate uh, in that manner, which we consider morality. That's also why we observe concepts that we associate with justice in species like dogs or other ape species. Because in group societies, like humans, like dogs, like other apes, you have to um, you have to act in a certain accord to the other members, or you're going to be left behind or killed yourself, and that obviously is detrimental to your survival. So in species that live in groups, there has to be some form of what we consider morality, and that's what we observe. Like, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but like even with like even like with like this like evolutionary, my bad, account of how morality arose out of humans, it would
Yeah,
just explain how we came to understand moral facts and duties. It would not explain how they are. I mean, you would say that like if we don't kill anyone, it would help us to survive, right?
yeah.
Yeah, this helps us to understand, you know, how we came to understand what moral duties are, rather than what moral duties actually are, like what the nature of them are.
I would say like it's the same thing. Like there is no deep fundamental reason why killing is wrong. The reason why we think of it as being wrong is because the people that didn't think that are now dead because nobody wanted to be with them or they killed each other or similar, right? So the species that is left standing is the one that has a natural sort of aversion to killing and has a concept of justice and these things. Like they aren't fundamental, I'd say they're a product of evolution. They're a way you have to act in accordance with the other members of the species to survive. I think. Have you? Do you know what emotivism is? Moral emotivism.
Emotivism. Are you saying like? Do you want to explain it to me real quickly? I know
Yeah.
what
Okay.
egoism
So
is. I don't know what emotivism is.
yeah, it's basically it's basically this thing that like when I say murder is wrong, that's merely a statement. So what what I'm actually doing in accordance with more with the emotivism is expressing a feeling. Like the feeling is as unique as, for example, pleasure and pain are, but it's a different thing, and that's what I express when I say murder is wrong. I'm doing a sort of equivalent thing to saying boo murder, right? If you understand what I'm saying. So what evolution has done is kind of instill these innate reactions within us, just like we get happy when we see other people do well or interact with our loved ones. We have this boo murder or yeah, if you get what I'm saying, like what we experience as moral fact or moral statements, such as murder is wrong, is an emotive expression of the feeling we experience when we see somebody treated unjustly or murdered, which is instilled in us by evolution.
Yeah, and as you said, right, if morality was not objective, these emotional responses would not even exist, right? For example, we say boo murder, right? If it's the
Yeah.
case that stands independent, objective moral facts say that murder is wrong, right? We would all obviously say boo murder, as you said. These
Yeah.
emotional response shows that objective morality is true instead of showing that subjectivism is true. I mean, even with like the level, the evolutionary account, right? We
Hmm.
see that killing, for example, does not really benefit society, right?
Yeah.
And so that would actually help us to figure out moral duties, as I said a second ago. So it would actually prove that objective morality is true.
Yeah, I'd say that it's objective in accordance with the like the emotive responses that that the evolution has selected for. So I'd say that in like yeah, like we are born with a presupposition or like with a predisposition to say boo murder and say yay doing well or you know what I'm saying. And in accordance to that, I'd say yes, morality is kind of objective. What I mean is that that's all there is to it. Beyond this process and the context of living together in a group society over evolution, there's nothing fundamental in the universe that tells us this is correct or this is wrong or this is good, this is evil. That's just how we perceive things because we have these innate emotive responses because that's what helps us survive. It's the same way that um, well a good no, actually I'll say that for later. You can respond if you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're saying. I mean, I think your point they try and bring up, right, is saying that we do have objective morality, right? You correct me if I'm wrong, right? But you're saying that we do have objective morality, but we just simply don't know if we have objective morality, right?
I'd say that what we have is a kind of code of conduct that evolution has made of this is like this is how you act to have a functioning group society. Like it's not because that's what is fundamentally true or wrong. That's just how our species has acted, and that's what has worked. And the ones that didn't, they're dead. So this is what works. But what I mean is beyond that, beyond like survival and living in group societies, there's nothing inherently good or evil or right or wrong in the universe itself. Like if you look at species that don't live in groups, take alligators for example, there's not even any sort of comprehension on the most basic of moral inputs. It only exists in group species and mostly mammals.
Okay, okay, yeah. So I think, like as you're saying, right? Um, like you're saying that, like people, society wouldn't function if we didn't have these moral values, right?
Yeah.
But it's not really a code of conduct if you think about it. We see people committing immoral acts over and over again all in society. I mean, I think we
Hmm.
both agree that killing is wrong, but we see people kill each other all the time. I think we
Yeah.
both agree that is wrong. I'm not gonna say that the actual word because recording, but like R-ing someone is wrong. SA
Hmm.
is wrong. But we see people do it all the time. We see
Yeah.
these immoral acts all the like every single day. So
Hmm.
I think the idea that it'd be a code of conduct is inherently false, because if it would be a code of conduct, we would all understand that these things, or we would all not agree, like agree to not do them, right? But I think that it would still prove that objective morality is true, but it's less of a code of conduct, more of a thing that we know is wrong. For example, we know that R-ing someone is wrong, but we still do it. Or I know we think that
Yeah.
R-ing
Yeah. But
someone is wrong, but people still do it. My bad,
yeah.
because of the pleasure they get, right? So they know it's wrong, but they still do it.
Yeah, but like that's also like how do we know morale or why do we have these emotive responses when we see our word like boo our word or boo murder, right? The reason for this is because uh, like the way this is instilled in us is the same way our recognition for faces or the instinct for burying food in squirrels is, which is uh, it's there's certain predispositions in our brain structure that makes us act in this accord. The thing is that when you're a child, of course, when you're very impressionable, what happens will have a very tangible effect on your brain structure. So if you were to grow up in a society where people went around killing all the time, then obviously you would also think that's okay. Like we aren't we're not like a robot that can only act in accordance to the moral predispositions. They're kind of just seeds that you have to water them through the growing up phase for them to actually be effective. So, but also we're just animals, right? So the same mechanisms by which we get emotive responses against doing such things. In some people, those are simply not larger than, for example, the pleasure they receive from committing murder or other heinous acts, and that's why they do it. Like, uh, yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that we have dispositions against certain acts, and you could call that a form of objective morality because it exists as a basis in all people because it's in our genes, but without like apart from society and living together and all such, there is no fundamental right or wrong. It's kind of just what works in a group society.
I mean, yeah. But like, the thing is, right? Here's just a quick question. You can just answer yes or no. Have you ever looked at someone and said, or like looked at like the news where it says like murder has happened, or you know, R-ing has happened, or SA has happened? Have you ever thought that, have you ever thought, that's wrong?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So if you are a more non-realist, right, and you
Hmm.
have ever claimed someone has done something objectively wrong in misrepresenting it's misrepresenting your argument then, because you've assumed epistemic virtues or duties, or arguing such duties are either subjective or not real. Intellectual is honest. I mean, intellectual honesty is the same as moral honesty. So you cannot reject realism if you wish to debate your position and assume it is wrong for one to misrepresent an argument. Um, I mean, we even see this like with like people such as Terence Kuno, right? It goes P1 if moral facts do exist, then epistemic facts do exist. P2 epistemic facts do exist. Conclusion 1, moral facts do exist. Premise 3, if moral facts do exist, then moral realism is true. So the conclusion is moral realism is true, right? We see these epistemic facts, right? We know, as you said earlier, you agreed that we know these things, right, are wrong,
Hmm.
right? Which actually just affirms that, or it will just affirm P2, right? These or P1, my bad. If moral facts do not exist, then epistemic facts do not exist. P2, epistemic facts do exist. Conclusion 1, moral facts do exist, right? Because you agree that we have this blueprint built into us, right, that says, yeah, killing is objectively wrong, right? So you would also have to agree, due to this, right, that moral realism is true because a moral fact is
Well,
simply just. What was that?
like I wouldn't say we know it in the sense that it is true, but we know it in the sense that we have this emotive response, right? When we see murder, we go boo murder, or we feel that feeling, if you will. But we don't actually know it because we have some higher knowledge of the universe think this is wrong or something of the fact.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, which you agreed to, is that these emotional responses would show that morality is objective, because we see that these things, we see these horrible things, and we say, yeah, that is wrong. And you said boo, boo murder, right?
Yeah.
Like, we say, like, or we, like, have like the feeling boo murder because we know it's wrong as a blueprint of our society, which you agreed to, which would actually show it's objective, because everyone around the world, as you agreed to from experience, right, neo-Nazism, boo neo-Nazism, neo-Nazism is bad.
Yeah, but like I think I need to clarify a bit. So um I wouldn't say that it's I wouldn't say that like when we look at a murder, we don't say that it's wrong because it is wrong from an objective stance. I can only judge whether something is right or wrong based on the feeling it evokes in me, right? So in any day-to-day life, if something invokes that boo something feeling in you, like that emotive response, going back to moral emotivism, that's the only standard by which you can judge it. So, for example, if I see someone fighting, for example, like if I see that they're fighting in the, like, I don't know, WWE, it doesn't invoke any emotional response in me. You just go about your day. It's just some fighting. If you see somebody fighting on the street and they're like killing each other, that feeling you get, that's the way you determine if it's wrong or not. And the way by which we construct, I guess, what you would consider moral realism, like for example, all agreeing that neo-Nazism is wrong, is because we all have a predisposition for having sort of the same emotive responses. But it's just that, it's just emotive responses. There's nothing objectively true governing them or behind them. It's just a response that's built into us, right?
Yeah, but like I would say the difference between like the WWE fighting, as you said a second ago, and like the street fighting is that with the street fighting, right? Like we believe that is wrong because these two fighters are actually fighting over something that they might need or might disagree about, right? But with
Yeah,
like WWE fight, they fight for entertainment and they don't actually hold anything against each other, right? They do it so
yeah,
everyone can enjoy the show. It's kind of like boxing, right? I do boxing, right? But I do it so that I do it because I enjoy it. I enjoy not I necessarily enjoy getting punched, but I enjoy punching other people, like not badly, right? But like entertaining others and I guess like being in the spotlight at some point, and I think that like it's a the difference between these two things is that with the street fighting, it's actually like real shit where like
yeah, of
you
course.
actually hate someone, which is why I fight them, which is the reason why the WWE might invoke a different response than let's say a street fight.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm just saying, like, the way by which we determine these things are the emotive responses, there's not because moral facts are either correct or incorrect. I don't think there are moral facts that are either incorrect or correct. Like, take for example, you're pro-life, correct?
Yeah, I believe that all life should be kept sacred in a sense, and I believe that
Yeah. Okay.
we should value our theist basically. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'd assume that do you think that life starts at what, conception or somewhere around that?
yeah. I would say that life begins at conception personally.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I am pro-choice. I'd say that 24 weeks or something when the brain is said to be fully
Be sentient.
operative, if we will. Yeah, some right. So um, if you read about an abortion or watch an abortion or like take an abortion for example, because you consider that to be a unique human life worth of protection, you will have a emotional response to that, right? You will have this emotive boo abortion. Well, I will not because I don't share that view. So the
Well,
reason why you say this is wrong and I say this is not wrong is it's not because there is a moral fact that it's either right or wrong. It's because in you it invokes this emotive response and in me it doesn't. And that's what I mean by uh, that it's sort of objective. It's just that we're kind of disposed to having the same emotive responses, but there's no true moral facts that are either right or wrong. That I disagree with.
I think like the different emotional response in abortion comes from the lack of understanding that people actually do have, usually, right? And because we like know like so little about like a fetus, right? Because we know like we know that the brain develops, but we don't like know when life actually begins. Like the part that's
Yeah,
subjective about abortion is when life begins, which I
exactly.
guess it wouldn't really affect morality, but when we're referencing to the effects of morality, right? Because people don't actually agree when life begins, right? It would
Hmm.
elicit a different emotional response. For example,
Yeah.
if I believe that life begins at 24 weeks, right, then I would have an emotional response to let's say, a fetus getting killed at, let's say, 30 weeks, right?
Hmm.
But because I believe that life begins at conception, right, I believe that any form of the death of a fetus, right, would inherently elicit an emotional response because I believe that the life has begun as soon as conception was, I guess, started.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess what I'm arguing is just that I think in a sense what you were getting at is that moral realism is true, that there are fundamental truths um about morality that are either right nor wrong, or wrong. And that I disagree with. I think that the basis by which we judge moral actions are not because there are actual truths or false, but because of these emotive expressions that we feel when we view events. Like for example, when I see I'm just gonna say real quick, when I see an animal kill another animal in the wild, like I still get that response, but it doesn't mean that killing that other animal is wrong. It's how they survive, right? It's just like it's just a predisposed feeling we have, and that's how we ground morality.
I don't think we should ground morality on like animals and that, because with the code of conduct argument, again, it falls over the evolutionary account, right? With where you're saying in the code of conduct, again, it goes back to the point which I said earlier. It just shows how we came to know about moral duties. For example, as you said, if I see, let's say, a lion killing a, let's say, maybe a fucking like a porcupine, for all you know, right? Like,
Yeah,
let's say like a lion eats a porcupine somehow, right? I would
yeah.
still feel sad for the porcupine, right? But I don't
Hmm.
think like it really shows anything, right? Because
Yeah,
they're not as sophisticated as humans are. I mean, I don't really think that some. I think that some animals might have some form of morality in the sense where they, let's say, don't think that trying to kill another, like a lion trying to kill another female lion is good. They might disagree with that and try and fight the male lion, right? But I think the problem with that, right, is that we're more sophisticated and actually able to come about moral duties easier, right, than like, let's say, a lion. I mean, and a good example is like the argument from experience. We think there are a problem with people, as I said like a while ago. We think there are people in the world who are doing things we believe they should stop, regardless of what they personally believe about the correctness of their behavior. If so, that doesn't mean that, or if so, then doesn't that mean that most likely we believe there is some kind of moral reality that is not defined by humans, that must be abided by regardless of what the person thinks. I mean, if we around society see these things, right, and say that we believe they should stop. I mean, it's good. It's just going through the case, because as you said, right, you agree that killing is wrong, right? But that would mean that this morality thing, or this moral reality, right, is not defined by humans. It's not what we think, right? It would be the idea that we have to abide by it regardless of what anyone thinks. I mean, it
yeah.
depends, right? 'Cause if you agree with the first two propositions, then right, then you would also agree with the second two with the last two propositions. My bad. I'll send it in chat if you need me to.
Sure.
Yeah, just give me a
Well,
sec.
I guess what I mean, like you say that,
There
like
you go.
it's not dictated by humans, right? Well,
Um,
I think in the same way that like our ability to recognize faces isn't dictated by us either. It's just kind of something we have, but it's not because there's anything fundamental to seeing faces. It's just something we need to survive and to be with each other.
I I disagree. There's a psychological disorder which means that you can't see faces, which means that there is something to be recognized with faces.
Yeah, exactly. But like that's a problem. Something has gone wrong in the brain. And just in the same way that it can with morality too. People who are psychos have measurably different levels of brain activity in the associated regions. Because like yeah, I get it comes down to like the reason why you think murder is wrong is because it evokes this emotional response in you, the boo murder emotion, if you will. And you don't want to feel that emotion. If you could choose to want to feel it, then there wouldn't be like anything wrong with it, right? And that's sort of a free will thing, I guess, because you can oh, what is the saying? You can no, I don't know, but the point is like you can't control if you have this emotive response or not. So like I think like it's not dictated by humans. It's just instilled in us from biological perspective.
Exactly. It's instilled in us. This emotional response is instilled in us, right? Because our emotions would say that it's wrong, meaning that this
Yeah.
moral reality would be true.
But only in the sense that it benefits our survival, not because it actually is true.
It doesn't benefit us. It actually doesn't really benefit our survival, right? I
Of
mean,
course it does.
let's say in America, right? If I committed mass genocide, right, I would be
Yeah.
killed. I'd get lethal injection. But if in England, right, I would spend life in prison, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
some other people, right, with like self defense, they kill people, right, and they
Yeah.
still get to survive. There's different like
Yeah. Yeah. Of
survival.
course. But you have to consider um like for 99.999% of human history, we lived in a hunter-gatherer society. Like now, imagine a few tribes. Like in reality, this would be different populations, but let's imagine tribes because it's more intuitive, right? So in one tribe, you have people that think that like they get this negative effect from killing and murdering that we have. The third no the second one is kind of indifferent. They don't feel many uh, emotive responses, and the third one get a positive emotive response from killing and murdering. So over time, the two other groups will, well, obviously the one that derives a positive response will have killed and murdered each other out of existence, so they won't be around anymore. Um, the ones that have the negative response, on the other hand, will be the ones that are left standing. And if you're an individual that happens to not like feel the same emotive response, then you will be abandoned by your tribe. They don't want to be with you if you act like that. If your emotive responses conflict with theirs, and that's how like it benefits your survival to act in disaccord with other humans. Because if not, you're gonna be left alone and you're gonna die and you won't reproduce. So the genes that govern that behavior will not spread.
I mean, actually, I disagree with this point. You're saying that like the people that would have had like an emotional like I guess say positivity to killing each other would have died out,
Yeah.
but that's actually not true. Have you read The Prince by Nico? I think it's Niccolo Machiavelli.
No.
Okay, yeah. So in his book called The Prince, right, he writes about I think it's different states, right? If I'll read the blurb for you, just so you understand the whole thing. Um, as a diplomat in a turbulent 15th century Florence, Niccolo Machiavelli, who was born between 1469 to 1527, knew how quickly political fortunes could rise and fall. The Prince, his tough-minded, pragmatic handbook on how power really works, made his name notorious and has remained controversial ever since. How can a leader be strong and decisive yet still inspire loyalty in his followers? When it is necessary to break the rules, is it better to be feared than loved? Examining regimes and the rulers the world over throughout history, from Roman emperors to resistant popes, from Hannibal to Caesar de Borgia, Machiavelli answers all these questions in his work of Realpolitik that still has shrewd political lessons for today. And so, with this book, right, he talks about morality. And he says that he believes that a state governed by a good leader should not be based off morality, right? And it
Yeah.
actually shows in Florence at this time that because if you read the book, right, he wrote to the prince, and the prince was able to receive the letter, and he actually applied this to his work. If you look at different histories, I can like get you the history if you want me to look for it. But he actually applied this to his work, or to his his work of governing the state, and he actually found out that if you don't apply if you take away your moral I guess say standards, you can still live in a society that is governed by the positive intuition to kill from governing leaders and authorities, or even like people that don't have an illicit emotional response from killing, neither positive nor negative, right? So
Sure,
even
but
in like states where these things do exist, or tribes if you'd like to say, if we have authority figures we can still live, but even with these moral or these immoral acts, I'd
sure,
say.
but modern leaderships, like that's a very different topic. Like this is more in the order of evolution. Like this, a lot of this probably occurred long, long, long before humans even had the concept of power structures and things. Like imagine for a second that you and me live in the wild, right?
Yeah.
And uh, I don't have any aversion. I don't get any response or negative response, I should say, from murdering other individuals. And you do get that. You have the normal response, right? So now, if I kill somebody right in front of you, like, will you continue to stick by me after that? Probably not,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I would say kind of depends, because if like we're gonna be like traveling across like lands where we see like a lot of people, then no, I wouldn't stick with you because I mean, first
Exactly.
of all, it will make me seem bad, and second of all, make you seem bad. But if let's say like we're not in like a place where like anyone could really see us, right? Then if you benefit me in a sense that we're able to survive together and this wouldn't happen again, then I would stick with you. But usually I would choose not to stick with you because you're an immoral person. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
I might do it because it's yeah, but that's different for another time. But
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
say for your like reductio, I would say that I wouldn't stick with you.
Yeah, you wouldn't stick with me, right? So the thing that happens then is the people that act in the ways that we find condemnable, they get left behind or they won't reproduce. So the genes that they have, which elicit these like non-negative responses, they will not be carried. Like over time, the only genes that are left will be the ones that give you the kind of moral blueprint we have today, and you don't even have to like this could happen long before we were the human species, like in early hominids, just like an animalistic impulse. If you see another part of your species being murdered, if you have that aversion, like you don't even have to like there doesn't have to be much thought involved. You will just kind of instinctually distance yourself from the individuals which carry out that behavior, right? So they will die out over time. And that's why we have morality as it exists today. And again, we only observe it in group species and mostly mammals.
I don't think these like what you're referencing like as like these moral ideas or ideologies, right, as you would phrase them. I don't think that they actually exist like these genes, because you're referencing that we have genes, right? Like your whole argument is fundamentally built upon the fact that we have genes, right? Because you said that I wouldn't stick with this person who kills people or who elicits this behavior. Therefore, you would choose, right,
Hmm.
not to, right, or you again, right, but I don't think this is really true, right? I mean, if you'd like to show evidence that we have these genes, then I'll, definitely say go ahead and do it, right? Because I don't think there's really any evidence that we had these, and if there was evidence, I think that the amount of moral realists would rapidly decline because these genes would actually show to us that morality is subjective, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
yeah. But that's what I'm saying, right? We have like a bunch of moral realists nowadays, right? A lot of moral realists. So I think you need to show evidence to back up the case that there is genes that reflect moral judgments.
well, I mean, you can kind of just reason yourself to it because, well, obviously we don't know the precise genes, just as we don't know the precise genes which cover a lot of things because it's very new. We don't like we haven't come so far in understanding it yet, but we're getting better. Um, but obviously, the brain structure is governed by genes, just as the structure of the heart is governed by genes. That's why, for example, all mammals have the same structure in their, I guess you would call it arms or equivalent structure, because it's the same genes governing uh, the formation of those structures. So if the genes, whichever they are, that are responsible for creating the brain structures were different, you get different brain structures. So the ones that yield brain structures that have like no aversion to murder will be they will not be selected for in evolution. So over time you'll get uh, genes, you'll get people with genes that result in brain structures that allow them to function in a group society, because the ones that don't are gonna die, right?
Okay. Well, you say that we can kind of like reason that these things do like are the case, but like again, it goes back to the definition I'm providing for objective morality, right? These stand independent moral facts, right? Independent of what we do, our goals or desires, right? These things still exist. I mean, they exist back from as you said, back from the tribes to the Vikings to even now, right? I mean, we see Christianity develop through the years, from the Crusades to now, right? I mean, you can see that these like people thought what they were doing is right, but when we look back, what they were doing is wrong, right?
Yeah.
They were doing it for power, and they were doing it for land, right? But what I'm trying to get at with this, right, is that the Christian idea, for example, even the Christian, it's just an example of Christianity, but the Christianity ideology, right, changes, and we see that now we actually show and we have evidence that in the scriptures it actually condemns this behavior, right? So the whole point with this, right, is that saying even with like the development in society, the evolutionary changes, it's still just going to be false to assume that we have these genes, right? Because if you're saying throughout like evolution, right, for example, from like being like in the caveman, right, to even now, we even see like in the 1980s, like or even like the 1945s, right, constant, and I mean constant evil, right? So if it were the case that these were genes, right, what maybe something like evolution, I think it's called selective. Or it's something like Charles Darwin said, right?
Natural
But basically, let's
selection.
say exactly. Natural selection, or something like that, right? Exactly, kind of like that, right? We would see that the people with that show that exhibit immoral behavior would die out. But 1945 comes along with Hitler, and then we see a Nazi regime which we all agree is bad and immoral. Even through like the 100 or 1000s, I think it's the second century or something like that, right? We even still see immoral behavior, right? The Crusades. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
we
because
see immoral behavior all throughout society, even like modern day immoral behavior, right?
yeah, of
With
course.
like Israel and Palestine. So I don't think that the immoral genes even exist in the first place, because as you said, we would all, even as you said, right, the immoral genes would more likely die out, right? We
Well,
do see. We do see that moral genes do not exist. It would more likely just be the case that these stand independent moral facts just exist, right? But we can either choose to obey or choose not to obey them, independent of the rightness or wrongness of the action of choosing to or to not obey.
I'd say that this is a misconception or misunderstanding because, like, evolution works on incredible timescales. Like, you're not going to see change over the last couple of centuries or even the last couple of millennia of the recorded history we do have. And it's also very important to recognize that evolution is not, as Darwin put it, survival of the fittest. It's just survival of the good enough. If you reproduce, your genes will carry on, no matter if they are the best or just okay. So, like, now, for example, like we are pretty much the same exact species that we were a quarter of a million years ago when our species is thought to have been fully came about. So, and now in today's society, there's not really a selection pressure anymore. Like almost everyone is going to survive, and a vast majority of people are going to reproduce. So there's not a massive selection pressure for those things yet. And obviously, as morality gets more sophisticated, as it has, there will be a smaller and smaller selection pressure because almost all people have these natural aversions, right? So uh, I'm not saying that the morality we have now is the best it could possibly be or will ever be, but it's good enough for our society to function. It's kind of like dogs, right? Dogs are empathetic to each other to a certain degree, but like obviously they're also brutal and they fight and all of that, but it's good enough to survive, and that's all that's important to evolution.
Okay, yeah, I don't really like kind of agree with this, right? I mean, you're saying like we wouldn't say like one gene is better than another, right? But I guess when we say better, we can refer to dominant genes, right? We do see like genes such as dominant genes and submissive genes, right? I mean, let's look at two parents, right? If we have like a parent that's brown eyed and another parent that's blue eyed, right? It's most likely it's 70. I mean, if you look at like science nowadays, if you I was in grade I think it was grade 10, I learned that if you have a blue eyed parent and a brown eyed parent, it's 75% of the case of the time, or 75% chance that the parent who has brown eyes would or the child who has the child would inherit the brown eyes because it's 75% of the chance that um, or I guess say basically simply the brown eye gene is more dominant than the blue eye
Yes,
gene,
and the blue eye.
and
Yeah.
the blue eye gene is submissive. So when we see like let's say two brown eye parents, we'd see that both of these parents, um, if we have two brown eye parents, the child would 100% be brown eyed, right? It's scientifically impossible for them to have blue eyes.
Well,
Um,
if both parents are a carrier of the blue recessive gene, they have a 20% chance.
are you saying like their parents? You saying?
No, no, I'm just saying like since brown eyes is dominant, if you have one eye gene for blue and one for brown, you'll get brown. And if both parents have that, then there's a 25% chance that the child will get blue eyes. But
Yeah,
if
but
they
I'm
have
saying
both,
if I'm saying if they don't have the genes for brown eyed,
yeah, then they won't get.
yeah. So back to what I'm saying, right? I don't think like you're saying of like good genes, right, would inherently matter, and um, I think the point of morality comes down to we have these things already like blueprint, as you said, like blueprinted onto us. And but I would say go even further a step and say that these things that are blueprinted onto us isn't subjective in the sense that we can decide if this thing is moral or immoral. I would say that it's just going to be either moral or immoral based on truth
Yeah,
value.
yeah,
But
no, I wouldn't say on a truth value. I'd say it will be either immoral or moral based on the emotive reaction it promotes in you. And like if you want to bring it back to the genes, like you agree that genes determine like how the body forms, how an organism forms.
are you asking me? I mean, are you asking me?
Yeah, you'd agree that DNA determines the or like how the person or organism forms, right?
I would say that, yeah, I would say like kind of like some genes. I mean, because some genes, if you look at like science, some genes like show you like how you may form. For example, like an embryo, right, might form like a few extra chromosomes, which make them a bit special or a
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
specially gifted.
yeah. I get what you're saying. But like we all agree that the what determines how an animal looks or forms or what phenotypes it has is its genes. And the same will be true for us, obviously. Like there are specific genes or sequences of genes that govern how the heart is constructed, how the skin is supposed to be. That's why all people will have like 99.9% the same genes because we all have roughly the same bodies, right? So there's also then gene sequences that are associated to the brain structure, and that's the point, right? If the only genetic differences between a certain amount of people is the genes governing how the brain forms, then well, who you select for will then determine which of those brain structures will be carried on in the population. So for like I think we can both agree that people that do the R word and kill people and such, they will obviously like people won't prefer to procreate with them over other more stable individuals, and thus those genes will go out of favor. Like the genes aren't inherently better or worse. It's just that genes they determine how the person will form, and yeah, okay, you understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like they will still carry on over time. Is that what you're saying? Like even if we don't want to
Yeah,
like be with them.
like like
Yeah.
like like if it were the case, right, that um if everybody had a gene that made them any like color, let's say, okay, and now let's say that like the people that feel good when they kill people, they are blue, and the people that feel bad, they are red, right? So if I only procreate with red people because I want like normal stable people, then every person will be red over time because the blue genes aren't being carried on. And like now you just substitute the color genes for the genes governing their brain structure. And that's what is happening or what has happened, I suppose.
Yeah, I do kind of understand what you're saying. You're saying that we were like over time, eventually we will see these things manifest.
I'm just saying like it's just a consequence of procreation. Like evolution happens in very small increments, right?
Yeah.
But if the only people getting laid are the ones who are like have a certain brain structure, then yeah, of course, those are the people. Like if you take people that have a particular fetish that is caused by a certain divergence in brain structure, which there is a certain amount of research on. If those were the only people procreating, then everyone would have those sexual deviances over time, because that's how the genes work, right? It's the brain structure getting selected for.
Yeah, I have dinner soon, so we can just give like the last like few points now, and then I'll have to go. But
Okay.
I'll just get this point really quickly. With this like argument, right? I would agree with you if it were like shown. If it was shown right, like that over time people would commit less immoral acts, but we see like the same moral acts right over time has not changed. If we compare it to like the 1200s, right, 1200, right, with like the Crusades, with like the battle of I think it's like the battle of Normandy. Don't correct me if I'm wrong, right? But we don't see like any moral difference or distinguishable any distinguishing between
No,
these things.
that's because evolution takes place over huge timescales, and also now it's kind of good enough to not change. Like we started from very non-intelligent organisms, and through iterative evolution, we have become very intelligent. So you would then you could say it logically follows that we would just keep getting more and more and more intelligent, but that's not the case because once we reach a certain point of intelligence, then there's no selection pressure anymore. We can survive because we are smart enough. Like we can build cities. Like you won't select for those traits anymore because there's no selection pressure to select for them. And the same thing goes for morality. Once we have a stable societal structure, more or less, and that selection isn't happening to the same degree anymore, which is the case, then obviously the process will cease. Or perhaps
Yeah,
it's just happening so slowly that maybe in a million years everybody would be perfect moral people. Like it's like like it's unreasonable to assume you'd see any significant change over time because that's not how the process functions.
okay, just a few points. First, we said like perfect moral person, which would actually show morality as objective because that means that there is a true perfect moral thing, which would be over every, it would be transcendental to every single idea that moral is. For example, is killing wrong or is it wrong or good, right? That would be or perfect moral standard would be transcendental to that in a sense. Last point for another time. With your point, right, saying that would change over like ages, right?
Yeah.
The problem with that is that you cannot actually show that. I mean,
I
because
mean,
with like morality, right? We've never my whole point, right, is that we're not able to observe these moral things, right? And you said like over time they changed. As I said like a second ago, right? We haven't been able to. We can't observe any change because there's still the same amount of killing among civilians as there was back in the 1200s. We see in we see
yeah,
in
but
Palestine, Israel, compared to like
that,
the
that
other armies and all that. Like we see like a tremendous amount of killings, even like
yeah.
people killing each other among societies. Like we don't see any form of observable change in terms
No,
of moral things, moral
but
actions.
we wouldn't suspect there to be any either. Like 1200s or even like all of recorded history only spans something like 7,000 years or 7,000 years BC. So what's that? 9,000 years? Um, that's not a long time scale on any geological uh, level. Like we see a lot of the concept we associate with morality in other ape species, not as fleshed out as ours are, but definitely in the same respect. And we shared common ancestors with chimpanzees, for example. That's 6 million years ago. So we see uh, moral tendencies in a species that we were related to 6 million years ago. So, like these changes happen over enormous timescales. Like you wouldn't
Yeah,
expect to see
but
any
that
change on only a few millennia.
Okay, yeah, but like the example that you're giving with like the apes, right, is that we see like more like characteristics of us change over time, right? But what the point that I'm asking, or what the point that I'm, you know, actually disagreeing with, right, is the moral genes, right? The
Yeah.
actually like I want to say looking genes, but that's not the right word. Like I'll say like looking genes, like the characteristics that make up appearance, right? Because it's an
Hmm.
exact word for the gene, right? But the looking gene, right? I'll call it that. We see this is like over long periods of time, correct? But with like moral genes, right, we don't see any difference compared from now to like evolution, right? Because it goes back to the point that I've brought up many times already. I've said
Yeah.
that the evolutionary account, right, is actually showing that we find out about this moral, characteristic, right? Or we develop our moral agencies, and we, I guess, say find out about it. That's the only way I can explain about it, right? We discover these moral duties rather than develop them and understand how they are, what they are, or make up what they are.